Sorry,
Me too. I've got no idea what the question was.
You would be so fucking angry, and no one's allowing you to express that. So of course they're all going to end up depressed and anxious because it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah. And they're locked in somebody else's closet, right? So your marriage is falling apart. I mean, even us women, like, even when we're in a just normal relationship, normal marriage, whatever, we live in this social media time where we only show each other the pretty stuff, right? And it's hard to talk about the hard things, even with your friends. But in that situation, these women are feeling like, I always say, they're locked in somebody else's closet, because if they talk about it, they're outing them, which is treason. And they can face severe retaliatory abuse for it. And it's scary. And so, yeah, they are bottling it all up inside. So, you know, when they're able to find these support groups, which is very, very hard, it's gotten, you know, progressively harder. Thank God this happened, you know, before it was such blasphemy, because now these groups can't even be made. Except we're on Twitter now, so that's good.
Yeah, we can make one.
But yeah, they're you know, gagged and bound and locked in somebody else's closet. It's really hard. There are a lot of suffering women out there. So yeah. It affects,
really very, very sad. Yeah, very sad.
Affects a lot of people. Everybody's like, oh no, it's just my thing, it's my truth, it's my identity, you know, but it's really affecting more people than you can imagine.
Yeah, I don't understand why there can't be a next thought, which is, well, what would happen if I didn't indulge this? And how could I live that life? I mean, is that too fucking hard as an option? Really?
Some of them do it. Some of them do it, you know, and it's this thing that people say can't be done. It's like, no, it's an addiction. You can choose something different. Everybody can. Everybody, I really worry about what we're doing right now, that we're giving up on human resilience. And I just think that we're sending these messages, you know, that like, you are this thing. If you have a problem, you are that problem. If you have, you know, a struggle, you are that struggle. And if you define yourself by that, then you're never going to want to get rid of it. You're never going to want to get rid of it, because then that would be losing what makes you you. So, you know, the goal has stopped being, oh, I want to be healthy, I want to get to this point in life, I want to go, you know, past this, and this is what I need to heal to do it, and into pathologizing the human soul, the human condition. I think it's ridiculous. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So do you think then, I mean, do you know of many recovered AGP cross-dressers? I'm really surprised to hear that, truly, because I think I've just always had it in my mind that I've never considered it being something that is can be overcome like other addictions. You know, in my head, it's kind of like a kind of built-in, you know, hard programs. Can't get out of that, because you talked about maternity, you know, pregnancy and breastfeeding and all of this being a bit of a trigger for a lot of these dudes. You know, so it's been what, kind of waiting to come out of them, you know, since a seed that was planted in childhood, and for some reason that's when it decides to pop up, or, you know.
Well, with fetishes, with paraphilias, it's kind of weird. I mean, there's a whole, you know, field of science dedicated to understanding them. And, it's a lot of it, something happens when you're young, and different ones have different correlations. And they're kind of inexplicable, but they're overwhelmingly in men versus women. And you can't help in a certain way. It's like, okay, well, you can't help something that kind of turns you on or piques your interest. That we don't know why that happens. That happens to all of us. It's like, oh, okay. I have this thing that I like. I don't know why I like it, but I like it. And when you add other things to that, when you add like OCD and all of these, certain situations, it's not that they never, they go from being, obsessed with this thing to not thinking it would be fun at all. They still think, oh, that would be fun, but it
just
they
don't
see
indulge.
it's healthy for them, that it's going to cost them their family and their work and their body. And the thing about AGPs as well, a lot of them, I mean, and I don't know all of them, obviously, but from my experience, it's like, it's not like they're getting happier. They tend to get more fragmented and more depressed and more, and if they can find the self-awareness, or if they have a close enough relationship to where they can hear the people around them being like, you're not happy, this is not you being embodied, this is hurting you. And just like any addiction or behavior that you do, to a point where it's like, when other people that if you can get through to them, like, this is hurting you, they can wake up. And it depends on how, I did a podcast recently about my theory of like the 4 stages that I see of AGP. And like, if you catch them before the first 2, I think they can turn it around pretty easy. The 3 and 4, like the ones where they're already out in mini skirts and going in the ladies' restroom, I'm not sure if any of them, but there's detransitioners, there's desisters, there's, anything can be changed, I think. And I don't know about true trans. I don't know all of these. I think that gender dysphoria, or this feeling, I know these people are experiencing something real and very powerful, right? Like, it's obvious everybody's having some experience. This is big.
Yeah, because it's a lot to indulge it. You'd have to want it pretty fucking bad.
Yeah.
Because
it's this obsession, and it feeds, and it's like, soon it's the undertone of every conversation, and soon it's, it's just because it's an impossible goal, right? Like the goals that we set for ourselves, we want to be able to achieve them. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment and obsession about why we're not good enough, why we're not right. And I think that that's what this does, is it's because you're never going to really be this thing that you want to be. You're never really going to be a man or a woman. Like, you're going to be what you are. And so the further they go with it, it's never going to be, oh, I'm there. And so it generates more and more dissatisfaction. And there are men that are self-aware enough to be like, this is not making me happier. This is not making me healthier. This is not good for me. And, a lot of them, God, and back when my support group was running and everything, was before there was things like sissy hypno porn. Like, it just, that stuff is so dangerous. And if you go on like Reddit or something, and there's, sissy hypno recovery groups, and there's thousands of men in them. Like, a lot of men want to get better, and dysphoria, wherever it comes from, kids are getting it one way. Kids are not AGPs, people.
Oh,
People say that. I'm like, no, they're not AGPs. That's not, I mean, maybe a few, but like, that's really not what's happening. But,
no.
dysphoria, I think that this thing that people are experiencing, it's coming from different places.
Yeah.
And for AGPs, it's very tied to sexuality. And so the recovered ones that I've known, or I know their wives and have seen their stories, they really do have to treat it like a sexual disorder, like a sexual addiction, and use those same steps. And it's like you said, Mel, like they have to go cold turkey. And when they get the impulse to do that, they have to do something else, and they have to like be invested in their own healing.
Yeah.
And in true, embodiment. And it's just hard. It's harder than ever now with the culture being like enforcing this narrative.
Yeah, because there's
just
no incentive.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we're all just conditioned, as you say, to anything goes in modern society. You can be whoever you want to be, but we didn't sort of follow that up with, but that doesn't mean that everyone around you needs to accept it. And so we're stuck in this weird twilight zone where we're expected to just go along and affirm everything, otherwise you are uptight at least, if not a bigot Nazi. So
Nazi thing. Like, God,
I
never
get
in my life
how
thought I
it
would be
all
called a
unfolds and
Nazi.
how it. Say again.
I said it never in my life that I thought, did I think I could ever be called a Nazi?
Yeah.
Let alone like a minimum of 20 times a week. Like,
yeah. It just doesn't mean anything at all anymore.
Like who cares?
Seriously.
Someone the other day was like, I was like, people try to speak up when and where you can. This was on Instagram, and a friend of mine was like, and risk being called blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, let me save you. I'm like, I'm a Nazi, bigot, misandrist, blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't give a fuck. Like, none of it means anything. Obviously, I'm not those things.
Yeah,
no.
I'll have to do this again because I thought this was fun. It was a good idea. About a month and a half ago, I made like a bigot bingo card for TERFs. I was like, okay, the only rule is that you can't go like purposefully antagonize people to be called these names.
Oh, right.
You can't like go be a dick.
Yeah.
And, but a little bigot bingo card, and then it has like TERF, Nazi, bigot, jealous of men, jealous of trans women,
obsessed with genitals,
genital fetishist. Oh my God, it's crazy. And but it's because they don't have anything substantial to go on, and that's what you do. You vilify opposition when you're trying to enforce an ideology. You vilify.
What's going on? I've noticed as well with the younger folk. Obviously, I try not to willfully and knowingly interact with young people on my social media, but of course you don't know who you're talking to often, and sometimes you figure it out over a few exchanges. But, I put up a little clip on TikTok a few days ago, and it was actually just a little piece taken from our chat with Tracy, Ask a Trans Widow. And I noticed in the comments, someone who announced themselves as being 14 years old, saying, why does my existence make you so angry? You make it hard for me to live. And all of this terribly dramatic stuff that you would expect from a kid who hasn't lived a day, And I don't say that to be patronizing. I say it as an adult. So if you're listening, kids, for God's sake, there's a reason we were born first. So this kid's coming at me, and I said, look, I'm not going to get into a fight with you in TikTok comments. But all I could think was, this child, that's what they immediately jumped to, even though the clip that they had just watched was of a woman, a mature woman telling her very real story about an ordeal that she went through at the hands of her AGP husband, and the breakdown of her marriage and how devastating this was and being gaslit by her therapist. Yeah. That's what was in the 1 minute long clip. And this kid went straight to, you just don't want me to be alive. It's like, fucking, where are these people's parents? Like, I want to parent all of these kids. It is right. Wild. Nobody is correcting this entitled, selfish behavior. My eldest is about to turn 14. He would never be that, off the charts selfish and actually that confused in the first place. But obviously I do my very best as a parent, so hopefully he's on solid ground. But you worry so much about what is going on in the private worlds of these children. They are so quick to get angry and enraged because you won't bow down or pre-accept them before you've never even interacted with them. It's just wild.
It's crazy. Yeah. My oldest is 13. So he turns 14 in January. And and he thankfully, like, he started venting to us about this. And he actually sent me videos and pictures yesterday of all of the flags in their school. And like, he got his phone out and like secretly recorded like a presentation, a video that they were showing for LGBT LMNOP History Month and Stonewall and National Coming Out Day. Are you kidding me?
Oh, like, Jesus. Yeah, grimmer city.
Like, when I look at the curriculum and I look at, like, they give these kids, this was at the end of last year, so he's in 8th grade now, he was at the end of 7th grade, and the legally mandated health class, fortunately, in Colorado, we were able to keep them out of any part of it. So I kept him out of all of the parts about gender. I was like, you can go learn about drugs and all of that, but all of the other stuff. But I looked at the material, and they like give kids like these 4 cards. There's your biological sex, and then your sexual orientation, and then your sexual identity, and then your, or gender identity and gender expression. And I'm like, okay, gender identity is personality, gender expression is fashion. Like, thank God those of us who were alive in the 80s didn't get our neon windbreakers like surgically attached, because like, fashion and personality changes like with time and context. What you're talking about with growing up, you get more context because you've been alive longer, and that's that's natural. You need to run some road before you get it.
Why is the education system so keen to have give any kind of guidance and leadership in this department for a kid's life at all? Yeah. I mean, I don't feel the need at this point in time to have discussions about intimacy with my son. We're maybe on the verge of that. We might, maybe in the next year or so, we'll have conversations along those lines, and I'll be perfectly comfortable having those conversations with him. I feel that it's the job of a parent to do that. And so these kids are being encouraged to kind of put themselves into these boxes of how they express themselves at 13, right?
Yeah, that was the end of last year, so 12, 13. And then you look at the exercises, because they give parents the link to look at the whole outline and all of the materials. And so you see the gender identity, gender expression right on the same level as orientation and sex. And then the exercise was, okay, pair off with a partner and talk about each card. And do you feel like you align with your sex and because if not, you might be transgender or you might be non-binary. And then, have a group discussion. So I'm like, okay, so you're giving kids at this point, because you know what it's like to be in middle school, 12, 13, you're dying to be a part of a community, of a group, of a clique, of a club, right? You're dying to be special. And they're literally just being like, oh, you could be any of these things.
And then every kid,
once they socially do it, they're more likely to medicalize. you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the slippery slope, isn't it? And these vulnerable kids, you know, how many of them, Mel, you tagged me in Laura Becker's post about she'd contributed to a piece in The Guardian about premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and that's a condition that I had, so I know a lot about that. But I wasn't aware actually that Laura Becker suffered with that. But it all makes sense because I do a lot of connecting the dots between transness in young girls and that condition, because it all just makes perfect sense, right? So all these kids being fed this stuff in school, all of those girls who are seeking the escape from the pain that they're in, right? Completely unrelated. And then suddenly it's like, well, there's this exciting thing, and that could get me attention. It could get, you know, it could form a support network around me, even though we've gone way off piste and we're thinking about all the wrong stuff. And then add to that, if she's a lesbian and or maybe has a history of being sexually abused, right? There's just the perfect breeding ground for.
He stumbles on porn these days.
Yeah.
So it accidentally sees porn and sees what's done to women.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. That's, you know, I just, there's so much harm being caused, and it feels deliberate to me, you know, and that's the thing that I think all of our guests, we've kind of touched on that area. You know, what do you think is going on really? You know, bigger picture, what is this all about? Because we understand that the trans agenda, if that's what you want to call it, right? That's what I'm going to call it. It's coming from every angle, right? We've got the AGP husbands being affirmed. We've got the true trannies who just want to get on with it and don't want to bother any women, but want to be kind of accepted for who they are, expressive, you know, that's fine. Then we've got the dysphoric girls, lesbians that don't realize they're lesbians yet, getting all confused. You know, it's every single angle is it's you know, it's all forming and getting bigger, and it's like a big volcano, you know. And I just feel like it has to be on purpose. It has to be, you know, somebody somewhere is making all of this happen and rubbing their hands together. And we could blame Big Pharma for all of it, but there's so much more going on, you know, like the social contagion and the mental illness that's just being completely overlooked. What the fuck? Like, why is society being failed this badly?
It's true. And I think, you know, like, I don't live in conspiracy theories, but I do play this game, right? And so the evil genius game. So like if I was evil, like the fruits of the devil, if I was evil and I was one of these, like, you know, stereotypically, like, you know, tyrants, the elite, if I was part of the deep state evil leaders, right? And you know, if you look at some of Jennifer Bilek's, I mean, all of these things, this is not imaginary, because this isn't operating like a human rights movement. It's not operating like a grassroots. It's not operating bottom up. If you think about it, it is being rolled out legally, simultaneously in many different countries, right? To a level where if you think about the expense, because if you're thinking about governments and cultures and societies, like you think about expense, not just financial, but the labor, the restructuring that you have to do when you undefine words as fundamental to language and law as man and woman, right? All of these things, this is not convenient for governments to do. This is high cost. This is culturally, fiscally, you know, socially, all of it is very high cost. So the fact that it's being embraced simultaneously, and that's also not how it works. Something will take root, you know, maybe here in the West, and then, you know, spread, or the other way. We influence each other, but it's rarely simultaneous. worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that if we're playing the evil game and we are some sort of tyrant, if we really were, Hitler or Nazis, we think, okay,
well, we are.
Well, apparently, I don't know. I didn't realize, but I guess so. But if we were, really trying to make a master race, or, these things are eugenics. Eugenics has been a war crime no, a human rights no for a long time. It's very hard for somebody who wanted to put eugenics into practice to actually do it now, because it's, very widely accepted as not a good thing to do. So there's the issues that these global elites are purportedly worried about are population control, population reduction, really, and then throwing a little bit of eugenics in there. And I think that the biotech industry is also at a specific place for eugenics to develop into eugenic genetic engineering quite easily. So if you think about it, this is the only way that anybody could practice eugenics right now is voluntary eugenics. So people are castrating themselves, and especially the youth. If you think about this, the level of autistic individuals and LGBs, that are being swept up in this, and self-neutering is huge, right? So those are historically, undesirables that were targeted by eugenics. And that's just the first wave. If you think about 15 years from now, our youth is setting themselves up for a huge fertility crisis. Huge fertility crisis in about 15 or 20 years. Like, even if there's a kid that hasn't messed with their own fertility, the chances, with the current statistics, the chances of them finding a mate who's also fertile, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot harder to naturally conceive. So they're moving, like Jennifer Bilek says, they're moving reproduction into the biotech industry. And so that's like, and that's a huge moneymaker, sure. But also, when you think about it getting there, anybody who's had IVF or any of these, this isn't cheap. There's only going to be certain people that can access it financially. And that's another level of eugenics, because that's going to take, well, then the poorer classes of populations aren't going to be able to reproduce. So, like, I often I find myself thinking, I'm like, this is just like a homophobic, misogynistic white dictator's wet dream. This whole, it's like, if I wanted to get rid of, if I wanted all of those yammering women to shut up, and I wanted to get rid of all the homosexuals, and I wanted to get rid of all of, the diverse and less fortunate classes of humans, then I would just do this. I would do exactly this if I was an evil dictator.
It's the perfect plan. It's too perfect.
It's like there's somebody, there has to be somebody somewhere doing the, evil, like, wah, ha, 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 ha. Like, gotta be something.
Talking about, the fertility rates are going to just plummet, right? I completely agree with you. And this is all suspiciously around the time that, the world got sick with COVID, right? And whether you got COVID or whether you were vaccinated for COVID, either way, you will have had some consequences. Okay, I think I've got a little bit of long COVID going on, but anyway, that's for another podcast. But either way, you were affected health-wise by that, and birth rates have declined globally. since 2020, you know, and particularly so amongst the vaccinated population. So it's yeah, it's all rather interesting. Nobody's having any babies.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It reminds me of that movie that Children of Men. Did y'all ever see that? Where there's
No.
Oh my gosh, it's a really good one. If you're looking for an apocalyptic movie, it's really
Okay.
I think Menno was in it actually. I think
Who?
that yeah, Mr.
You know what?
Menno.
I knew someone else that was in that movie.
Yeah,
So
I think
that's
he
a
was
small
in
world.
it. Yeah, it's a really great movie. But they, you know, human birth rates had ended, and you know, schools are ghost towns and all of this stuff. And then there's a pregnant woman, and they're trying to get her to safety, and they're trying to, you know, it's interesting. And I think that if you, I mean, at the very core of this, if you control the womb, then you control the world. And that's, you know, historically, I mean, to keep women in, once patriarchy was installed, to keep women in control, you know, in control of women rather, we were constantly told how powerless we were. And we may not match men physically, but we have an immense power in us. We have the power of our wombs. We have, even if we don't have our wombs, we are that energetically, spiritually. We do hold that portal energy. And I think that's been an obsession of the archetypal male controlling energy to try to limit that, but it's unlimited. But if they can neuter, if they can there's a word that is just on the tip of my tongue. Neutralize, something like that. If they can take the power and the charge out of enough of the population, then the parts of us that trickle through will be easier to control. There will be less power in the masses, and less of, you know, personal autonomy and the ability to make our own choices. And so, you know, my son, for example, he's a type 1 diabetic. Side note, because parents of type 1 diabetics, we always have to throw this in. It has nothing to do with sugar. Type 1 is only 10% of diabetics. It's completely autoimmune. Nobody knows what causes it. We're still waiting for a cure. We're hoping for it. Big Pharma stands in the way of curing it, because if they cure type 1, they'll cure type 2. But it's an autoimmune disorder, right? So insulin is a hormone. A lot of people don't understand that, you know, this is an endocrine disease. So insulin is a hormone. And he got it when he was right before his 3rd birthday. And it can't be reversed. It can't be cured. If anybody says, have you tried a keto diet, or have you the moss from the rocks in Brazil, or, you know, I'm like, no, type 1 can't be reversed. Thank you. But ever since he got it, I've, as a mother, had to think about, because if a type 1 doesn't have insulin, they die. Like, or if they get too much insulin, they die. Like, it's a very serious disease. If we didn't have access to the government and to medications that are provided by them, like, my child would die.
Yeah.
And so that has, like, created this awareness in me of how dependent I am on modern society as it is. You know, I've wanted to travel with him and to take him to certain places, but I always have to think, where am I going to get insulin? Where am I going to get the hormones that my kid needs to survive? And that's, I think that's another, there's this, if you mess with people's endocrine systems, and you get them to where their chemical balance of their bodies are dependent on the medicines and the, you know, pharmacies and the availability of these things that the government provides us. And then, you know, it's hard for people like that to rebel. I always say in the apocalypse, I'm just going to be like, you know, I'll be on the front lines because my kid's going to go quick. So I'll be, you know, or I got to figure out how to brew insulin in a bathtub, or, you know.
It's funny that you're, you know, I know you're joking, but I have thoughts about this all the time, you know, when the apocalypse comes and we're all told to take cover, where's the nearest pharmacy that I'm going to raid for all the estrogen to keep me alive? Because I can't function without it, you know. Yeah, I've already got my plan where I'm going to break in.
Oh yeah, we're going to the pharmacy first. I'm a thyroid cancer survivor, so I don't have a thyroid.
Wow.
But thyroid hormone, it would take me like 3 or 4 months to die, I think. But insulin, it would take my son a week, you know, or less. And so I'm like, my kid would probably go out first. My daughter would still be alive and would, you know, fight with me. But no, you know, like if I'm going down anywhere, I'm gonna be on the front lines for 3 months, and then darkness. Oh, I hope we
Mel, what do you need to keep you alive, Mel? What are you stealing from the pharmacy when the zombies come for us?
Chocolate?
Nothing I can't do without.
No.
Nothing I couldn't give up. Yeah.
See, now we have to protect you so you can stay and fight for women. We'll be.
Yeah, I know. You're the only one of us that's surviving.
It is man